Welcome to the front row. I'm your host, Brad Rowe, and this is a space where unfiltered stories of the human condition get told. Pull up a chair. So last episode, I talked to you guys about the experiences I had as a child and some of the traumatic things I went through. And this episode is about the armor that I built up, the life that I created based off those false identities and the lies that I believed in myself. So I think a great place to start is in high school. High school is a really interesting time. I think everyone goes through this. It's a time that you start to develop and figure out really who you are as a personality, figuring out who your friends are. That's when your insecurities really start coming out and hormones start changing, and you're just a really confusing time. For me, high school, it had a greatness to it. I was the jock, even from a freshman in high school. I walked in and was a starter for varsity football, and I was, one of the starters in our basketball league and kind of the popular kid. I was a good student, so I was, in some of the more advanced classes, but I didn't feel like I fit in. There was this deep sense of insecurity that I had. I went to a regional high school, so there was 4 different towns that all fed into it, and especially freshman year, coming from the town that I grew up in, we were the outcasts of that community. We were the poor Seabrookers, the rock throwing bubs, and we were considered uneducated. So, I walked into high school kind of with like that little chip on my shoulder, more of an insecurity than a chip than anything. So, in high school, in lunchroom, you got the jocks that sit together, and you got the music kids and the art kids and kind of the punks. And I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. And that was just based on my own insecurities and not understanding who I really was in a lot of different ways. High school, like I said, I was an athlete, started varsity as a freshman, played 3 sports. So on the outside, I was kind of this popular kid. As well as being, in some of the more advanced classes and things like that. On the outside, everybody thought I had it together, but on the inside, I was about as lost as they came. As I mentioned in the previous episode, there was the workaholic part of me that started at an early age. Growing up in a family that didn't have money, anything I wanted, I had to provide for myself. So if I wanted a cell phone, if I wanted a car, all these things, I had to work and pay for it. And kind of that fit in with that workaholic mentality that I picked up at an early age. So all through high school, I was working 1 or 2 jobs, plus going to school, plus playing sports, just to provide for the things I wanted. And because I hated being poor, I was so embarrassed of I hate saying this, like so embarrassed of like my mom's cars and where I lived. I would never invite, unless it was like my close inner circle. I didn't want people to see where I came from, and I'd be so embarrassed. My mom picked me up from events because if she had this crappy old Monte Carlo or crappy old Dodge Caravan van, and so I think I worked my ass off just to get things to kind of fill that materialistic void in my life. So I had to have the great truck, and dumped all my money into buying these 6 Chevy pickup trucks that were all done up with chrome rims and everything. And even though they were older models, at least they looked shiny and fancy on the outside. The gym became a big part of my life. When I was younger, like I said, my cousin Frank brought me into lifting with his high school teammates and stuff. And me and a couple of my buddies just really kind of dove into lifting because we were also athletes. So we wanted to be better in that perspective. So high school, we would, as soon as we could drive, we would go to the gym and work out at like 5 a.m. before we went to school. Get out of school when we were at practice or we were working. I worked weekends. There was never a single moment in my life that I wasn't either in school, working, or playing a sport. And I didn't know what stillness was. I didn't know what busyness, what just relaxing was, because I never saw my family do that. So why would I do those type of things? And then, there was those times where those insecurities really took over. Um, Partying became something that I started at a young age. I think I, really started partying and drinking at like 15, 16. And being drunk was like the only time that those insecurities didn't take over. It was like the time that I could actually be free and have fun. Like even at a young age, I carried this weight. Like I couldn't have fun. I mentioned that in the previous episode. It was all my friends used to joke, acting like I was so serious all the time. And so it took alcohol for me to kind of break down those walls and those barriers just to let loose. And it was like the only time I didn't feel like I was under the significant pressure to perform and achieve and work. So I love to drink. It was a blast. So me and my friends on the weekends, every Friday and Saturday night, would go out and either go to a friend's house and get drunk and party, or go to different house parties and stuff. But that didn't come out without its challenges either. My insecurities and fears ran so deep. I remember if I was ever on an elevator by myself and someone got on the elevator, like I would pray that they didn't try to have a conversation with me and talk to me. I would get sick to my stomach. And throughout high school, when I was like a junior and senior, I had a lot of my friends were older because of sports and stuff. They were off to college. So I would go visit them and would go to frat parties, and, I'd have to get drunk before I showed up just to overcome some of that. But even then, the fear of then the social anxiety was so high that it was like clockwork. Every time we showed up to a party, just as we were about to walk in, I would get sick to my stomach and I would have to go like run out in the woods and go take a shit in the woods, because like it was such a nervous system shock to me that I would get extreme diarrhea. And like most of the time I'd have to like use my sock to wipe myself or my underwear. So I would have to get belligerently drunk just to overcome that social anxiety to go out and to party. And as I mentioned in the previous episode, because of the things I went through sexually at a young age, the extended periods of molestation and kind of really losing my innocence at such a young age. And then even how I lost my virginity. Like I said, I chased women, and having sex was like validation to me. But it was strange because I also never spoke to a girl. I was just one of those people that, like, I would always sit back. My friends would always shoot game to girls, and somehow always a girl would end up, falling back to me, and that's how I ended up, scoring. It was, kind of playing like that shy person's type approach. And to this day, I think I've asked out maybe 3 or 4 girls my entire life. Like legitimately, my ex-wife made her move on me. Almost every girl I've been with has made their move on me. And it's like, as far as my healing has gone in this journey, and as confident I am as a man right now, as soon as I have a vested interest in someone, it's like my brain shuts down. And again, like if I see a beautiful woman and I don't have any desire to, to pursue anything with her, I can carry on a type of conversation. You put me in a room with millionaires, billionaires, professional athletes, celebrities, I can carry a conversation anywhere. I don't feel insecure in that at this point in my life. But when it comes to women, it's still something that just cripples me. And like I said, it's really ironic that I had that outlook, but yet promiscuity was just such a big part of my childhood, especially from high school and college, and shortly after college. So the workaholic thing, that poured out into, or the performance thing, that poured out into athletics and academics. When I graduated high school, I was a pretty good football player, and so I had some interest from some colleges and stuff, and they weren't as big as I knew I could play. So I decided to do a prep year, and I went to this little school in Bridgeton, Maine called Bridgeton Academy. And basically this is just like an athlete feeder house of kids from inner city schools and stuff that either couldn't pass their SATs or couldn't get the GPAs, but they were elite Division I athletes, and they go to this place just to kind of pad their academics so they could go on to college. And for me, it was kind of the opposite. I had the academic side of things, but coming from a small school in New Hampshire, I didn't get the recruiting that I'd really hoped for. So I go off to this prep school, and again, like first day of practice, I walk in, I'm around all these new kids, my social anxiety's going crazy, and my dog died. And my coach came down and told me my mom had called, and like here I was, just like broken down, bawling my eyes out in front of all these kids, and just like I just felt like the weakest little bitch in the world. And that really filled my insecurities when I was there. I'm around, like I said, all these kids had pretty much Division I scholarship athletes waiting for them, and I'm trying to prove myself, and I'm just this little white boy from New Hampshire, and here I am, like breaking down, crying my eyes out, and just felt like such a little punk. And that was just one of the worst experiences that I had in my life. I actually blacked out most of that experience. You had kids from all different backgrounds, and you're thrown into this dorm room, and everybody's fighting for position, everybody's fighting for a scholarship. So there was a lot of tension, a lot of trauma, a lot of drama, I should say. Like second game into the season, I ended up breaking my ankle. I hurt myself really bad and missed most good portion of the year. Didn't get enough quality film in. Ended up missing the combine at the end of the year where all the coaches and stuff came. So a lot of the interest from schools that I had coming out of high school had dropped away. And so I decided to take up an offer from this school, Marist College in New York. They were a small Division I school. They had good academics. At that point, I knew I wanted to be a doctor. Like football was the passion, but I also knew that I wasn't going to go to the NFL, or might have had a chance to go to Canada or something, but it wasn't going to be a career thing. So I wanted to be a doctor. Obviously, being an athlete, I want to be an orthopedic surgeon. So that was kind of my desires and dreams. And the school had a really great biology program, pre-med type program. So I could go there and play ball and get a good education and not have to pay much money at all. I had some offers from bigger schools to walk on. And I think one of my biggest regrets from being younger is not taking that opportunity, not betting on myself. I think because I bet on myself to go to the prep school and things didn't work out that way, it just kind of instilled this fear to make that leap and put myself out there. So I ended up going to the school, and I walk on campus, and I'm already pretty much the best athlete on the team. And that was kind of demoralizing. It was like, because the bar was set lower than what I expected. And when we talk about life, we talk about anybody, if you were born and you were given gifts, that's probably one of the worst things to happen to you sometimes, because you don't really lean into those gifts. So here I am, I walk on campus. Like I said, I'm one of the best athletes already as a freshman. So I didn't put the effort in to training. I didn't put the effort into making myself a better athlete. I mean, I still had a great freshman year. Started a bunch of games. I was conference offensive rookie of the year a couple times. I had a really, people would love to have a freshman year like I had, but it wasn't challenging. And so I took those gifts and I took that opportunity for granted, for sure. And same thing with academics. School was a joke to me in high school and prep school. So I go on to college, and I just relied on my general knowledge and didn't really study. And I did okay, B's, B minuses. So going into the summer of my sophomore year, or end of my freshman year, going into my sophomore year, I got in a motorcycle accident on my 21st birthday. Was getting ready to go out on a joint bachelor party with some friends in my 21st birthday, and my buddy showed up with his new bike. And so I love motorcycles. So I took it for a ride. Was riding a wheelie down the road, and a car pulled up apartment complex, and I had to slam on my brakes and clip the car and wiped out. Well, I ended up spraining my knee. And so I missed a good portion of preseason heading into my sophomore year. Obviously coaches weren't happy. I'd given up snowboarding because I didn't want to get hurt, but I didn't give up the motorcycles. So I missed majority of preseason. Then what do? I tear my hamstring, trying to do my conditioning test. So missed a good portion of the season. And like I said, when you're given these gifts, sometimes you just don't lean into them enough. And I love football, but I didn't love football. I didn't study film. I didn't study the playbook. My mentality was just hand me the ball and let me do my thing. And I was good at that. I was like, you put the ball in my hands and I'm going to make plays happen. But that's not what football is about. There's so much more to it. So sophomore year, still started a majority of the games, had a decent season. Then we go into junior year. You think you learn your lesson, but I moved down to South Carolina to go visit my best friend, to stay with him for the summer and just have a fun time down there, just partying. And we worked a ton, partied. So I decided to buy a new motorcycle when I'm down there and riding a wheelie, doing about 75 miles an hour. And I flip over backwards, no helmet, tank top, jeans on, sneakers. Somehow I didn't die. And you're looking back at some of these moments. It's like, man, how did I not realize that God was on my side through all this? Scun just a little tiny chunk of hair out of my head, just a lot of road rash everywhere, had a huge hole in my knee. So going into preseason, they wouldn't clear me to practice because the hole was right on my patella tendon and they were worried about infection. So I missed a good portion of preseason. And then again, I tore my hamstring doing conditioning tests. And my junior year, I actually got less and less playing time. And I couldn't figure out why. And so it ate me up. Like I said, all my teammates, they knew how great of an athlete I was. They knew how good I was with the ball in my hands. And so, they'd talk to coaches and try to encourage me to keep pushing. After football ended that year, I kind of had to have this. And now I look back at it, to me, I say I was trying to focus on getting into medical school. And I knew that football wasn't going to be the end game for me at that point. But really, I think it was part of me of fear of failure that I decided to quit football going into my senior year. In my head, like I said, I had to carry a ton of credits and I had to do a bunch of internships in order to consider even going to medical school. So I walked away from the thing I love the most based off this lie that I told myself. But the truth was, I made stupid mistakes. I actually had a drinking and driving incident as well my junior year. So there was just a lot of things stacked against me. And I understand why coaches didn't put me on the field as much as I should have been on there. But that was painful to me, to walk away from the thing that I love the most. I couldn't watch football for years. I didn't go watch any of the games. I couldn't celebrate any of my friends that still played to this day. I still have dreams all the time. I have dreams all the time of like, oh, I've got another year of eligibility left. And so I'll have these dreams that I'll go to college and try to play. And you got, those dreams where like you show up to a game and you don't have your helmet or your cleats are missing. And it's like you put in all this work and it's not there. But, I think it's that that deep rooted trauma of quitting on myself, you know. But like I said, I made this excuse that the focus was on school, and I did. I focused on school. After my sophomore year, organic chemistry was that big wake up call for me. I got a C minus, so I had to learn how to study and I had to learn how to really apply myself in school. Second semester of sophomore year was when everything clicked, and so if you take away those first 3 semesters, I did really well in college. I still didn't have the confidence about applying for medical school. So after college, I graduated and I decided to go to a master's program based on getting guys into, getting people into professional school, whether it be dental, veterinary, or medical school. And so I ended up going to Drexel University in Philadelphia to pursue my master's in biomedical science. Did great there. The same old trend of me going out and partying and having fun, sleeping around, continued there, getting validation from there, still working all these jobs while I was in grad school, and finished that 1-year program. And again, like I told you guys, I was poor, and even the money I had, I was stupid with it back then, buying motorcycles, buying nice cars, spending money on booze, things instead of saving. So when it came around to apply to medical school, I just didn't have the money. They tell you you're supposed to apply to at least like 5 to 7 schools. So you're looking at like $5,000 to tie up into applications and stuff. And I just didn't have the cash for that. And neither did my parents. So I took a year off and I went back home to New Hampshire to do construction. And again, one of those things, like I walk away with a master's and everybody's like, why don't you go do something in your field? It's like, at that point, like, the only thing you can do is go work in a laboratory. So I work in a lab making $18 an hour, paying taxes, or I can go swing a hammer making $25 an hour cash and do something that's actually more enjoyable for me. So went back to New Hampshire, still studied for my MCATs, took my MCATs, scored well. I had the grades, I had everything to get accepted into schools. If that was the path I went down. Well, during that time, I had met this girl and we had started dating and things were really, really hot and heavy. That's when kind of partying and stuff backed off for me because she just couldn't handle her liquor. Every time we went out and drank, it was just an incident. So we stopped drinking and focused more on just like spending time together. Or if we did go out, like I wouldn't drink as much. And she became kind of a gym rat. So that was kind of something that we did together. And through that, like my body just changed drastically, stopping drinking. And 1 year in college, I dressed up as the Ultimate Warrior for Halloween. And so that was my MySpace profile picture. And it was right around December of, I want to say 2009. Yeah, December 2009 or January 2010. This guy hit me up on MySpace and said I had a great physique and he'd helped all these bodybuilders and would love to help get me into the bodybuilding fitness modeling world. And I was like, it's this old dude. And I'm like, who is this creep? I'm good. So I just totally ignored this guy. Well, about 2 weeks later, this fitness modeling agency finds me. Same thing. Like, hey, you have a great look. Would you ever be interested in fitness modeling? And at the time, that was like the worst thing in the world because that girl I was dating, all she wanted to do was be a model. She would go to all these, casting events, which were just like cow calls, just lining up and getting shuffled through. And I saw all the money and effort she had put into it. And I was like, I'm good, man. No, thank you. And he's like, hey, I know I can book you and stuff and it pays. He's like, just send me a couple quick shots. So we go up in the gym, take a couple photos, send them to him. 2 days later, I book a muscle and fitness shoot. And things just start kind of spiraling from there. He invites me to go to the Arnold Classic with him to kind of bring me around different companies and show me around there. So again, I didn't really have much money. And the guy I was working for, this contractor was like, hey, he's like, I'll pay for you to go out. Let's fly out together. I'd love to go see this anyway. And I'd love to open doors for you. I believe in you. So we went out there, go to the Arnold. I ended up booking a bunch of shoots there, and everything kind of propelled. So I get convinced to move to New York City, to move into my agent's house and pursue kind of like modeling and acting down there. So I leave my life behind in New Hampshire, go down there, and things are picking up, from exposure and things like that. Just booking magazine shoots left and right, nailed a couple of national commercials. But when I was there, I ended up running into this guy at the gym. I had a great body, a great look. And we get talking, and he's like, hey, so I do some like escorting stuff, and, like there's no sex involved, but it's really good money. These guys are all trusted, and they're looking for young, good looking guys just to pose and flex for them. You keep your underwear on and stuff. And, and at that point, I had no regard for my body from a sexual standpoint because of the things that had happened to me. And there was also that part of me of, by growing up with a gay dad and the things I went through at a young age, being molested by other men, I'd built up this security in myself that, like, I knew I wasn't gay. Like, I had no interest in men whatsoever. Like, I knew that my heart and my soul belonged to a woman, and that's all I was attracted to. So I was like, whatever, like, make some money, do something that doesn't really bother me. And so I went down that path when I was in New York, and it was a way that I made really good money in really short periods of time. So, whether it was going out to dinner with a guy or going and posing trunks, and then that turned into posing nude, and then that turned into them wanting to massage you, and I never went down the path of sex, thankfully. But as much as I told myself that I was okay with it, it fucking disgusted me. Like I would leave, and I would just be filled with so much shame and guilt. And, again, I would just convince myself that I was good, that I was secure. And again, that devil's distortion from a young age of just not respecting my body in a sexual manner. I just did things that I definitely wouldn't do now in my life. I'll tell you that happened during that phase in New York. And then my fitness modeling agent was like, hey, you should consider competing. If you get into bodybuilding, you compete. It gives you more exposure. We can, get more magazines. We can possibly get sponsorships. So I started getting ready for a bodybuilding show. And again, like, things just fell in my lap so fast in this industry. I ended up signing a contract with Universal Nutrition as one of their sponsored athletes. Did really well at my shows. And right around that time, it was around end of June, July, that creepy old dude from MySpace, the first one that reached out, well, he reached out again. Come to find out, it was Ed Connors. And if anybody of you know the bodybuilding world, Ed is one of the most prominent figures there. Ed and his partners bought Gold's Gym Venice from a single gym and turned that one gym into 750 gyms worldwide. Ed was the one that found the likes of the Ultimate Warrior, the John Cena, Jay Cutler. He's had his hand in so many prominent bodybuilders' lives and professional wrestlers' lives. And he invited me to come to California to compete. So I took him up in his offer. I flew out to California, did the Excalibur in December, won that. And Ed kind of convinced me, like, hey, this is where you need to be. I see a great future, and I have a great eye for talent, and I know that you can be really successful in this. So that was back when all the magazines and everything were in Los Angeles. Like, social media wasn't out. I think Instagram had just come out at that point. So being in Los Angeles was the place to be. And typically Ed had always owned a house in Venice Beach and let guys stay there and until they built their lives up. he wasn't there anymore. He was in Palm Springs, but he was like, hey, you can come stay in Palm Springs and just drive back and forth to casting calls and stuff like that. But it was also this like hyper independence of me. I'm like, I don't want to rely on this guy. And if I'm going to be there, I want to be there. So I decided to sell everything I own. And I told my family, I was like, listen, I'm going to give this a 3-year window of opportunity and see what happens. And if things don't go well, I'll go back into pursuing medical school. At that time, also, I was dating that girl, and it was a very toxic relationship. One of those relationships where you yell, scream, fight, and one good night of sex, you just forget about everything. We had just gone through an abortion right before that show, and another reason to move to California was like to run away, to get away from that, because I just felt like I would have been trapped in that relationship, that never ending relationship. And also just run away from, again, like I was clinging on to any form of success and validation. And medical school was a passionate thing, but it was a longer, harder road. And now here was this thing that could bring more validation in my life. And I used to joke with people that bodybuilding is made up of 3 different types of people. You have the egomaniacs that are just continuing to fulfill their ego. You had the insecure ones that were trying to build up their ego. And then you had the athletes that were the natural transition. And I used to convince myself that I was the latter. It was like, oh, I was naturally gifted. I was an athlete. I saw bodybuilding as a second chance of being a pro athlete. As I squandered my football career, I felt like, and so I felt like this was my opportunity to be a pro and utilize the gifts that I had. So I moved to California, and it was rough at the beginning. It was really rough. I get out there, and I end up getting a place, trying to find a place with a mutual friend who I knew was a drug dealer for a long time. I didn't realize he was a drug addict as well. Never had a bank account, never had any money because he blew everything. So I was pretty much funding both of our lives for a while. I was having a hard time finding clients. Like I said, I went out there with no job, nothing. All I had was this rinky-dink little sponsorship from Universal Nutrition. I think I was getting paid like $750 a month plus supplements. When I got there, I told myself I was not going to do the escorting thing. It's so taboo in the sport. And that was something I was so shameful. I was trying to run from that because, you hear guys like the Kai Greens and some other guys that have done those things and it would come to light, and like it really tormented their careers. So I did everything I could to try to bury that behind me and leave that behind so it didn't tarnish my image moving forward. I got fortunate where I was introduced to this one client, and so my first client was like this amazing paying live-in weekend type client deal, and things just picked up, man. I was blessed right from the get-go. As soon as I walked into Gold's Gym Venice, literally Chris Cormier comes up to me. He's like, I want to be your mentor. I want to train you. 3 hours later, Charles Glass is like, I want to be your mentor. I want to train you. And like, they're like bickering over who's gonna train me. I ended up going with Chris because he was the first one that reached out. So Chris Cormier was unk to me. And he pushed me. And bodybuilding was just one of those things that just fed into all my trauma. This like I said, I had this mentality that no one was ever going to outwork me. So I busted my ass, and I saw it as a new opportunity on a lease of life of being a professional athlete. So I wasn't going to squander this opportunity. And I prided myself on how fucking hard I worked and how hard I worked out. The first couple of years at Gold's, everybody thought I was a conceited prick because I would walk in and like hat down, go to work, train my ass off, walk out, either train my clients. When I was training there, I didn't talk to anybody. And then finally someone like had a conversation with me like, wow, you're not an asshole. You're actually a really nice guy. But I just carried this mentality. Like if it wasn't making me the best bodybuilder or it wasn't making me money, I don't have fucking time for it. And that's that mentality that I kept for the 10 years I was there. More than that, 13 years. Things picked up, even when I was going out there, I really didn't know if I could be a professional bodybuilder. But first nationals, I get third. And that kind of like put that spark in me. And again, like I said, it was bodybuilding. It was masochism for me. And I trained with anger. I look back now at some of those videos, some of those training videos, and I'm like, I could never do that because, like I said, I trained from trauma. I trained from anger. Uh, I would literally train so fucking hard that I would be in the bathroom shitting my brains out and puking my brains out in between sets, back and legs. Every single workout did not matter. A couple times, I wouldn't skip a beat. It was just, I would shock my nervous system so much and poison myself with lactic acid buildup or whatever it was, a combination of everything, that I would literally be on the toilet shitting while I'm puking into a bucket, go back to trash barrel, go back out, get another set in. And having Chris Cormier as your mentor, who was known as one of the harder working guys in the industry too, didn't help matters at all either. Then I met my wife. Probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. We hit it off quick, fast. We moved in right away with each other. She was such a caring, grounded, hardworking person. We were both just so focused and so locked in. And so she was supportive of me grinding away, and I was supportive of her grinding away. We built a hell of a life together, and so grateful for the person she was and who she was. Bodybuilding career took off. I mean, I was doing everything. I had a meal prep company where I had to be in the kitchen at like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning to prep food because I was renting out a commercial bakery. Had to get in there before they had to get in. So 3 days a week, I'm in there doing that. The next day after making the meals, I would deliver them. So I want to be on the road by like 3:30 in the morning. Cause if you know LA, traffic. I would literally drive all around LA delivering to like 20 to 30 different clients, if not more at a given time. And there was one point where we built it up to where we were doing a little over 1,000 meals a week, and I was doing all the legwork. So I would be in the kitchen by like 2:33 to finish up before 5:30 when they were coming in, 5:36ish. Go right to the gym, do my fasted cardio, start training clients all day. I was training 10 to 12 clients a day, plus getting my workout in midday. And that was my life, like 7 days a week. I didn't take a day off. Sundays was probably my slow day where I'd train 5 clients maybe. And I'd get invited to stuff and I wouldn't go. Like I said, I had that mentality. Like if it wasn't making me the best bodybuilder, if it wasn't making me money and growing my career, both aspects, I had no time for it. So I turned down every social engagement. And my wife, she was very social and wanted to go out and have fun. And I was just like, I didn't have anything. I didn't want to go do those things. I carried this anger with me at all times, always. I was miserable, but that mentality, like I said in the previous episode, I thought the more miserable you were, the better you're doing. So she had to walk on eggshells always. And everybody in my life did, because I could snap in an instant. And it wasn't that I was like abusive towards them, or yelling at, abusive things at them. I would just snap. And you guys have seen in my YouTube videos, as you've watched, I'd drop a pen and just lose my shit, break the pen, break my phone, break my laptop. And I'm like, I'm good, but and people can't live around that, and I didn't see it because that's how my family was. And I just wasn't present. I'd come home, and after, a 16-hour day, I'd rush in the door as fast as I could, unpack, repack everything for the next day, make a meal, my last meal of the day, sit down on the couch, turn the TV on to something mindless, smoke a joint, and my wife would try to have a conversation with me. I'm just like, I got nothing. I'm this shy, introverted kid as it was, and I have to have conversation all day. And so like I'm emotionally drained, I'm physically drained, and I didn't give her what she needed. I used to tell her all the time that she deserved better than me because I knew I hated myself. But she was a trooper, man. She was my rock. But there was a lot of ways that I was a good man, in my eyes, and what society tells us we need to be. I was that protector. I was that provider. I did everything. I did all the cooking, all the cleaning, all the shopping. I wanted to make her life as easy as possible. Any job she didn't like, I'd be like, quit your job. She's like, I can't. I'm like, yeah, you can. Quit. I'll support us till you find something else you love. Like I wanted her to find her passion. So from that perspective, I was a good man. And also, going back to the lustful sexual side of things, something clicked when I met her. I became my best friend. And so I never once cheated on my wife, never once entertained anybody, because that was my best friend. And I flipped this of like, man, like I can't, like, what if she did that to me? Like I would never want to hurt my best friend for like that. So that was something I was proud of as well. That, especially living in Gold Gym Venice, being in the bodybuilding career world, fitness world, where the hottest chicks in the world are walking around everywhere and they're just throwing themselves at you, and everybody's dealing with their own insecurities and on all these hormones. So everybody's just banging each other left and right. And I never got caught up in that. I had my eyes on her and that was all I needed. So I'm proud of those things. The bodybuilding career, like I said, it picked up. I mean, I stepped on the Olympia stage as a rookie. I did things I never thought I could accomplish. I was consistently in the top 5 of most, mid-tier shows. But I knew that I wasn't going to be a top level bodybuilder. So I approached the sport differently. I didn't push the crazy size game. I didn't push the drugs. I had my limits, but I also just stayed in shape all the time because I was that pretty boy. I was always available for photo shoots. I was booking all these national commercials. There was a couple years in a row where I was making over 100K a year just off commercial work. And, I've been in multiple Super Bowl commercials. I've done commercials with, Sylvester Stallone and Dolph Lundgren and Danica Patrick, and done stuff with Katy Perry and had all amazing conversations with them. And so was exposed to kind of this world of celebrity through that. And bodybuilding opened up a lot of doors in my life. I got to travel the world. I got to see different places that I never would have because of it. Now, also on the flip side, I would travel to those places, like going to Japan and places in Germany and Finland and Russia. And it was literally like from the airport in a cab to the hotel to the venue and then leave. I would never even take a day or so to explore because I felt bad not being there for clients, not showing up, because I was this people pleaser on top of the money thing. I didn't want to walk away from money, and money controlled so much of my life. We talking about bills, and if my bank account wasn't going up each month by X amount of dollars, like I would go into complete survival mode. I'd starve. I'm like, oh my God, I'm like we really had to cut back. I'm like stressing out, and my ex-wife would freak out. She's like, I'm gonna go, I'll go bartend again. And I'm like, no, it's okay. I'm like, we're not losing money. We're just not gaining as much as I want, because I wanted more than I ever had. I wanted to be able to support a family. My vision was that I didn't have to kill myself when I got older, when I had the kids, so I could actually be present. I just wasn't present in the moment. But again, like I said, bodybuilding opened a lot of doors for me. I was able to make a lot of great connections with people, and ended up stepping into the space of being a celebrity trainer, working with a lot of high profile individuals. I mean, at one point I had 5 billionaires on my roster, plus the likes of Mike Tyson, and working with people like Whitney Cummings and like Dwight Howard. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Gina Carano, who's fighting next week. And I was just so fortunate of the life and the opportunities that it had given me. But again, it was all based off trauma, fear, and insecurity, like feeling like I was never worthy, never enough. Bodybuilding also brought some of the greatest torture in my life. Uh, blessings, blessings and the curses. My training partner for over 3 years was Sean Roden, one of the best bodybuilders, probably go down in history, one of the most beautiful physiques. At the time we started training together, he was fourth at the Mr. Olympia. And here I am, this little white boy next to this just aesthetic marvel of a masterpiece. We had the same coach, Chris Aceto. We trained together. So every morning, Chris would want pictures of him. So he'd have pictures of me too. And we'd get together 4:30 in the morning, go up in the posing room, take photos of each other. And I already hate myself. I already hate my physique. And that's the one thing I look back at bodybuilding. I did not appreciate anything. Every photo I took, I would get sick to my stomach and thought I looked like shit. Every time I stepped on stage, I thought I looked like shit. I hated how I looked. Never appreciated any of it. But then here you are, especially going into my rookie year. I was, my pro debut was a couple weeks after the Mr. Olympia. So we're both prepping for pretty much the same time frame. And again, I'm comparing myself to the number 4, who was about to be the number 3 bodybuilder in the world, and just so demoralized. Sean believed in me, and I was going to back out for my pro debut because I didn't feel like I was ready. And he comes to me one day and he's like, "Hey, there's a show in Russia the week after. I believe in you so much. I'm going to pay for you and your wife to go. Flights, hotel, everything. That's how much I believe in you." So to kind of get that boost from him was huge. And sure enough, I ended up getting third in my pro debut. I go to Russia. I got 6th there out of like 30 something guys, but I'm a nobody in a foreign country. But man, just the insecurities that ran so deep with the bodybuilding stuff of just feeling like you're not good enough, you're never enough. And like I said, taking progress photos in the morning, it would just fuck my whole day up. I'd be so disgusted in myself and hate myself so much. But now I'm able to look back at my career and be like, wow, you were actually pretty good, Brad. And I think that's my biggest regret about all of it was I didn't appreciate the people. I didn't appreciate the experiences. I didn't appreciate what I accomplished. I did so much in my life, so much through that career. And I just couldn't appreciate the ride. And I think the greatest thing now is I can look back and be like, be proud, man. Like, um, even though they weren't, the accomplishments weren't created because of the right drive. It was still such an amazing accomplishment and experience. And everything led to amazing opportunities in my life and meeting amazing people. And but I was just so blinded by my own hatred and own insecurities, I couldn't appreciate it. And the culmination of the pinnacle of everything was here I am heading into 2019. I'm entering the prime of my bodybuilding career, entering the prime of my training career. Beginning of 2020, I signed this enormous investment deal to open a world-class performance and wellness center. I'm training Mike Tyson. I'm married. Got a beautiful house. Got sick cars. I mean, everything that everybody in the world would dream of. Or most guys, I should say. I had it. I had it all. And I still fucking hated myself. And I still felt empty. And I still felt like this scared little boy. And I didn't appreciate any of it. And then everything got torn apart. And that's the next episode.
This story ends today, but yours is still waiting to be told. You're not alone in this walk in life. If this hits you, share it with someone that needs it. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Find me at Brad B. Rowe at Instagram. And if you're ready to step into the front row of your life, whether it be the fellowship, the foundry, coaching, or support the ministry, you can find it all at frontrow.co. I'll see you next week.